Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rich Hoffman, TPO National Sales Director here at Flagstar Bank, and welcome to our July Flex Series. Our topic today is one I don't believe we've ever covered before, and one that's not only very important, but is also ever prevalent in our industry today, and that is mortgage fraud. Today, we're going to talk about mortgage fraud trending, help provide you with some tips and best practices, as well as some fraud detection resources. And joining us today is one of our very own First Vice President and Director of Mortgage Fraud here at Flagstar Bank, Nanette. Nanette and I go way back. She's been with Flagstar for 28 years. Nanette, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Hi, Rich. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. So let's start. So this is an area that a lot of people don't talk too much about, right? Mortgage fraud, but it's one where I believe we can add a ton of value and help protect our customers and keep them safe and sound.
Yep. So yeah, we're going to talk about mortgage fraud today, and hopefully we can help all of our business partners protect themselves. So looking forward to this.
So let's start by letting folks know what's the main purpose of your department and what are some of the responsibilities that you and your department perform?
So our mortgage fraud investigation unit here at Flagstar is responsible for several tasks, but our most important role is investigating unclosed and closed mortgages and HELOCs to identify suspicious activity to help prevent and detect with that, and then share the trends with all the business units to help reduce losses. Our team is also responsible for screening all of the participants in mortgage transactions, as well as screening all of our employees, contract employees, vendors, and vendor employees in a mortgage-related role to make sure they're not in any industry or exclusionary list, as well as we also do business partner risk monitoring.
It's a pretty big responsibility. How many people do you have in your department in whole?
So as of right now, there's a total of 15 of us. Out of the 15, there's probably, I want to say 8 investigators. We just hired a few new ones. So that's where we're at right now.
Great. So let's talk. So loans can find their way to your area in a myriad of ways, right? Talk about the different ways in which loans can get to MFIU and what are some of the referral sources that potentially send issues your way.
Sure. So our team receives probably, I would say, around 98% referrals. So probably 2% is randomly selected. The other 98% is referred from various business units within the bank, as well as external referrals. So our number one referring party would be underwriting, which is a good thing, right? You want to make sure that we're identifying suspicious activity and catching it up front and avoiding any losses. Second biggest referral party is our our quality control team, pre-funding, post-funding. We also receive referrals from loss mitigation, claims mitigation due to repurchases. We also receive phone calls through our hotline, law enforcement. We get them from everywhere.
Interesting. So I think just going back to you mentioned the number one referral source was underwriting, and I think that carries somewhat of a negative connotation. But the way I see it is it's almost a protective measure to make sure we're protecting our customer. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that if there is suspicious activity, we're catching it up front, because if we're not, then it could come back as a repurchase or an indemnification for our business partners. And we want to try to avoid that if we can.
Right. So we'll talk a little bit more as we get forward into what the time frame looks like and how that process works. But so a loan comes your way and you guys perform an investigation. What are some of the potential outcomes or status results, and what do those exactly mean that a customer might see?
So we like to say either suspicious activity or no suspicious activity, or once we respond to our business partner, it's either resolved, no concern, or concern not resolved. And what that means is if the concern is resolved and it's an unclosed loan, we're going to remove that loan from audit hold and we're going to allow that transaction to proceed. Our investigation's closed out, everything's moving on as normal. If it's an unclosed loan and the concern is not resolved, then we will deny that loan and close out our investigation. if it is a closed loan and it's not resolved, then we'll just close out our investigation, do required necessary reporting. I think there is confusion at times with some of our business partners. I think that at times they feel just because they provide a letter of explanation or what they feel may be supporting documentation that it resolves the concern, and that's not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think, you know, and we're going to get into that. I wanted to ask you in a minute how important that response is and how important it is that that response is detailed and has some information in there we might be requesting. There's a lot of times where we could be working on something that's potentially a bigger issue than just that particular loan, right? And so the information that they provide is extremely important.
Absolutely.
So over the course of time, right, we've seen an awful lot of different fraud trends and different trending, right, over the course of your 28 years that you've been here, and over the course of time that I've been in the business. We've seen so many different things, and it continues to evolve. It continues to change. It never stays the same. There's always something new. There's always different things that are trending, whether it be employment fraud, income fraud, you name it. Talk about what is trending right now and what we're seeing the most of today.
So right now, the top three concerns that we are seeing, but also in the industry is, and they've been the same consistent trends for years and years, but they're just switching things up a little bit. So the number one trend right now that we're seeing, as well as our investors and so on, is income and employment. Our second is undisclosed debt, and third is occupancy. Those have been the same for years and years. So with employment income, what we're seeing a lot of is we're seeing a lot of borrowers leaving their jobs prior to closing. And what they're doing is they're waiting until after the verbal verification of employment's completed. So they're doing it right before the loan closes. And so we're finding that out when the loan's pulled for a pre-funding audit. We're also seeing a lot of borrowers who's been on the job less than a year with a significant increase from their previous job. And so you can't order tax returns. You're kind of questioning, is that significant increase, factual? We're also seeing where we have borrowers who have been in one type of career for the last 20 years, say a barber earning $50,000, and now all of a sudden they are a restaurant night shift manager earning $100,000 on the job less than a year. Big difference. And then you start adding in generic pay stubs and so on. So you question, is that income really valid? Another thing we're seeing is, which is kind of new and just recent, is verification letters. We have where there's verifications letters provided stating this borrower will take this job as of this date. When that loan's pulled for a post-funding audit, we find out the borrower never actually started that job. Or remote is a big thing right now too. So part of the documentation is, you have a borrower lives in one state working in another. There's a letter provided stating this borrower's allowed to work remote. We verify that letter. They're either not allowed to work remote at all, or it's a small percentage. So those are kind of what we're seeing in the income and employment.
I want to go back to, you mentioned undisclosed debt, which is something that's been around forever. And I find that that's something that, in addition to the income and employment that you mentioned, is something that for a lot of our customers may seem like such a simple little nuance, right? That is missed oftentimes, or maybe they think it's not a significant amount of debt, right? Mm-hmm. That's left out. And a lot of times it's not, in the majority of the time, it's not left out by our originating partner, it's left out by the borrower. So what can our TPO customers do to ensure that the borrowers are giving them every single line item in debt that they have, so we can take that in consideration so we don't stumble across that? Because that oftentimes ends up, killing deals, obviously, and then it could come back to bite them at the end as well.
Yes. So I think with that, the biggest thing is educating them. I think a lot of times in a lot of these situations, when we go back to business partners and we have them address it with the borrowers, a lot of the responses are, I wasn't aware, I didn't know. So I think by educating, letting these borrowers making them understand from the time you fill out an application to the time you close, you should not be opening any new debt. And if you do, you need to disclose it. We need to revise the application, requalify you. A lot of borrowers don't realize, that it's a big deal. Like, oh, I just, bought a new car.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're trying to be deceitful. They just
Right.
don't know. So they get excited. They go out and buy new furniture for their house or get a new car. Or a big one that we see is undisclosed properties. They own them free and clear. So they think, well, I have a zero balance, so I don't need to let anybody know about that, not realizing we still need to qualify for taxes and insurance. So I think if the loan officers are educating the customers and letting them know, you should not be doing this. However, if you do, you need to let us know so we can take the necessary steps. I think that's the biggest thing. Or there's also a tool called undisclosed debt monitoring that I think, some companies use, not all, but that's a very helpful tool as well.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think for all of our customers out there, if there's a way for you to put into your process prior to closing that we're making sure that either you're pulling a new credit report or you're reminding your customers or you're using that tool not to go out and buy new furniture or buy a new car, because certainly it's an exciting time when you get into a new home and you want to fill it with all the goodies, right? It does cost money just to wait till you close first and then go ahead and go ahead and make those purchases. So we've seen a very high level of ID theft, and there's been some trends related to HELOCs. I want to get into that for a few minutes because it's something that's new. HELOCs are very prevalent right now, as you know. We offer HELOCs here at Flagstar. And why don't you share with us kind of what you and your team have seen, and let's help educate our customers on what they can kind of look out for.
Sure. I mean, identity theft has always been a thing. We've always known about it. I think right now it's starting to take the mortgage industry by storm. And so I did create a few slides to kind of go through some trends and red flags and things to look out for to help our business partners. Okay, so in this scenario we're going to talk about is these imposters have either attempted or have obtained a home equity line of credit or a cash out refinance in the name of victim without their knowledge. This scenario was so thought out, very detailed. As part of the application process, these imposters knew every piece of personal identifying information that you can think of regarding these victims. I mean, everything out there, they knew everything.
And we don't know how they got it, right? I mean, it could have been stolen off the internet. It could have been purchased from somebody, right? They just had everything they needed to take out the line of credit or cash out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people still trying to figure this out. It's came on fast and furious, so it's new, and so I think by information sharing, we can all help each other out and hopefully eventually figure out who's behind this, but we may not ever be able to find that out. Also, in addition to them knowing every piece of PII for these victims, they were also providing documentation for loan qualification, pension statements, asset statements, driver's license, trust documents, anything you needed, they had. Keep in mind, the goal of these imposters was to obtain as much cash out as possible without an interior appraisal. So as we talk about this, I don't want to keep it just focused on HELOCs, also cash out refinances. Again, anything without an interior appraisal. So some of the trends that are being identified in this scenario is, again, focusing on HELOCs and cash out refinances. And a lot of these properties were high value properties with minimal to no loan balance. So $1 million homes and up is kind of what the trend is. And then they're targeting victims of retirement age. But I want to be clear, just because these victims are of retirement age, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily retired. Some of these borrowers actually have a full-time job and receive no pension income at all. Also, take a look at your credit report. There's several things on your credit report that I think will help you kind of determine, is there possibly identity theft here or not? First thing, are there fraud alerts? If there's, that's a big thing. Also, there's a lot of inconsistent information on the credit reports. So when you're looking at your credit report, make sure you're looking at the number of inquiries. Is there a significant number of inquiries on this credit report in a short period of time? That's a huge red flag. And is it with different banks, several different banks? Why? Also, look at the employment. What does the employment say on the credit report? If the credit report is saying that the borrower's in the medical field, but you have pension statements through the state, which is usually for police officers, that's a huge red flag. Also, you may see inconsistent addresses on there. So question the supposed borrower. Most of the time, they're not even going to know what those addresses are because they don't belong to them. And then also look at your income, your pension income. A lot of the cases, this income is excessive. $10,000, $17,000 a month. If you're a teacher and you're receiving pension of $17,000 a month, most teachers don't make that a month without being retired. So ask yourself these questions. Does this make sense? And then again, a lot of instances in this scheme, there was income statements from state retirement. The typical asset statements that are being used is Wells Fargo and Bank of America. One thing I'd like to point out is when you're trying to verify pension statements, a lot of companies don't re-verify that. So if you feel that your pension statement may be fraudulent and you attempt to verify it and you cannot, if you have a bank statement and it's showing direct deposits from that pension, go that route. Try to verify that bank statement. If they come back and say it's fraudulent, you pretty much know that your income is fraudulent as well. And then one of the big things that has been part of this scheme is requests for out-of-state closings. So again, really trying to avoid the appraisal, the interior photos. The explanations or reasoning for the out-of-state closings is I'm on vacation. Can I just do it where I'm at on vacation? Or the subject property is my second home. I'd like to close it in another state where my primary is. Huge red flags. So make sure you're, looking out for any out-of-state closings. And if you see that you have out-of-state closings, make sure you're doing a real deep dive on those files. And then signature discrepancies, make sure you're looking at every document that has signatures. It is believed that there's more than one individual working on these loans. There may be one calling in, doing the information, one providing the docs and so on. So make sure you're checking signatures on your driver's license, your applications. If it's, that would be digital, but anything that has a signature, make sure you're comparing it. And then another thing is your letters of explanation. When you are requesting a response due to an address discrepancy, a lot of times these explanations are very vague. Belongs to son, belongs to daughter. No, they do not elaborate whatsoever. If it's an inquiry, no new debt. And that's it. They do not further elaborate on anything. And then on an occasion, you may see cut and paste photos on the driver's license. With that, sometimes it can be tricky to tell, but look for like off-centered, look for overlays, that kind of thing. And there's also booklets that you can go out to or websites where you can look to see, how does each state's driver's license look and kind of compare what does the driver's license that I have in front of me look like.
So when these loans funded during this trend, was nobody was caught based on where the money was wired to a title company? They weren't able to track any accounts or any particular individuals through this?
So I think that with the processes that have been implemented and the teams being educated, the majority of these were not funded. But on the ones that have been funded, no, there's not been anyone identified yet.
Interesting.
So I just want to show everyone a couple examples of some of the documents to be on the lookout for. As we talked about earlier, there's pension statements being utilized. So here's one from the Florida retirement system. If you look at this, the borrower is earning over $10,000 base allowance with a high COLA of $3,500, so you have about $13,000 a month. If you look at the statement, you can see a couple things that are highlighted. There's typographical errors, very messy. And then again, going back to talking about the credit report, you look at the credit report for this victim. It shows that they work for Realty or was a branch manager, but they're getting pension from Florida Retirement, which is usually for police officers. So, make sure you're doing your due diligence and checking that out.
Misspelling.
Yeah, benefits.
Yeah.
Here's a copy of a California pension statement through CalPERS. This, if you notice, is the exact same format that we just showed for the Florida retirement statement. So exact same statement, not as sloppy here. You don't see the typographical errors. CalPERS is receiving such a demand for verifications of these statements. There's so many fraudulent statements out there that they've actually opened their own investigation. So sometimes by looking at it, you may not be able to realize that it's fraudulent until you actually pick up the phone and call and try to confirm by the borrower's name, date of birth, social security, and get that verification. So really, keep an eye out on it. Not saying that all of these are fraudulent, but you'd rather be safe than sorry. So, make sure you try to verify them. Here's a copy of some bank statements. As I mentioned earlier, Bank of America and Wells Fargo are primarily used, not to say that those are the only ones. But as you can see in these examples, the Wells Fargo logo is on the incorrect side of the bank statement. So that's a red flag. Again, these statements are very sloppy. They have misalignment of their font. They have numbers squeezed in. You can see the retirement deposits on these, and you can see that these two statements have the same deposits. On the first one, where the red square is in the upper left-hand corner, you can see, again, very sloppy. It should say balance, then the next line should say deposits and additions, and the last one should say withdrawals and subtractions. They have it all mixed together.
Well, these are easy things for someone to miss, right? Because if you're an originator, you're looking at bank statements, even though you're looking at them all day long, right? You're not assuming the worst, number one. Number two, they're probably using two of the larger banks because they're so prevalent, right? And easier to I guess, mess around with. But I would say looking at some of these, unless you really stopped and paid attention to some of these or really knew what you were looking at, I can see how somebody can go through and easily miss some of this, unless there was a blatant misspelling or something was just terribly sloppy.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, we're trained to do it. So,
Right.
we hone in on it pretty quick. But I think some other things that our customers could look out for is, if your borrower is refinancing a subject property and on the application, they're saying they've been in the state of Florida for 20 years, and you're looking at their bank statements and all their activity for, all their bank statements are in the state of California, that's a huge red flag.
Sure.
Start looking into that. But also take a look at the mailing address for the customer, because that could be, if you're looking at that address and it's not consistent within the file at all, do some research on it. Check to see who that address belongs to. Is that another victim of identity theft? Do you have a customer with that name? Like, take the extra steps to make sure, that there's not others. And then just a few tips for our customers. At any point, if you feel that one of your transactions may be potentially identity theft, go out and do research through public records or through LexisNexis. Look up, the customer's name by social security number through Lexis or through public records. Look for their name, their phone number, address, email address, all of that. If you're typically, when you do those searches, you're going to realize that nothing matches. And right off the bat, you're going to realize I have a case of identity theft. And then also check your internal systems by the customer's name, social security number. Look to see if there's additional loans. And if so, compare the documents in both loans. They may both be fraudulent, or maybe just one may be real and the other one may be identity theft. And then, also get a copy of your driver's license for your borrower from your closing agent. Compare it to the one you have in file, if you have one there. And then if you should ever receive a call from a victim saying, I'm a victim of identity theft. I just realized there's an account with your company under my name. What do I do? Encourage them. First thing to do is file a police report, contact your local law enforcement, get that out of the way. And then make sure they're adding, a fraud alert to their credit report with all 3 credit bureaus. We want to make sure that they are getting that done. And then another safety measure would be contact all your creditors, ask them to put a PIN on their accounts to make sure if someone's calling in, to make sure they're not being taken advantage of again, they have to know that PIN. And then this is something I recently found out about, didn't know it was a thing, but certain counties you can place a title lock on your property. So at any point, if there is any type of written inquiry on your parcel, the county will contact you and let you know that someone is looking into your property. So that's a quick, easy process if your county offers it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And then just a few other things. If you do identify that there's identity theft and it's a funded HELOC, make sure you're immediately freezing that line. You want to make sure that you're preventing any future draws. You want to try to reduce the risk as much as possible. And if it's an unclosed loan, make sure you put it in some type of audit hold status. We use audit hold, but some type of hold status to make sure that that loan is being prevented from funding. And I think the biggest thing here the biggest takeaway here is make sure when you're coming across an identity theft or any of these trends that you are educating your team. Our first and second lines of defense are our eyes and ears. They should be looking out for everything. Share the new trends with them, show them the red flags, show them the fraudulent documents, get it in front of them, let them learn and understand so they can be proactive and escalate any future instances to you. And then if you have out-of-state requests for closings, make sure your closing management, it's escalated to them for approval. Let them put a second set of eyes on that before that, request is approved. And if it's internal loan officers taking the applications, if you have a direct-to-consumer, channel in your office, once you identify the suspicious activity, go back and listen to the recordings, get familiar with the voices. And then, on the next time you come across one, listen to that recording again. Is it the same person? Again, share with your loan officers, listen to this voice. If you come across this voice, take the application, but immediately escalate it. Get that word out there. And then another thing that's helpful is take everything you've learned from this scenario, create a red flags checklist, put that document out there on your business page, publish it to your first and second lines of defense. Let them have that and go back to that and reference it if they need to. That would be a huge help.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks for sharing all those. Certainly some things that we can all take away. And even if we implement a couple, right, we're safer and better companies and a better organization going forward for sure.
Right.
So after we've identified a potential risk, right, or a potential issue, and we reach out to our business partner and we ask for a response, which we talked about earlier, why is that response so important and how does that help us and help our TPO?
I think it's so important because at the end of the day, we want to try to resolve every issue that we can. Our goal is not to deny a loan, but our goal is to make that loan saleable. So it's very important that our business partners work with us. They are the business partner. They know the customer. We're looking for them to try to resolve this issue if possible. But also, part of that is our investors require us to report suspicious activity.
Right.
And when we report suspicious activity, we are required to, let our investors know, how did we receive this investigation? What was our research? What was our results? How did our business partner interact? What type of documentation was provided? So, it's very important that we get those responses. And a lot of times it will help, there's maybe missing pieces of the puzzle, and that will fill in that missing piece of the puzzle. And we may be able to close that out as no concern and move on.
Right. So we have an internal SLA to get stuff reviewed, and obviously that varies based on the volume of receiving activity. What should a customer of ours do if they're in a situation where we find something near the end of the underwriting cycle, let's just say, and the loan's got to close in a couple days or whatever the case may be, and time is of the essence? They have a deadline that has to be met. How should that be handled?
In those situations, I think they should include the account executive, but also email mortgageinvestigations@flagstar.com. That inbox is monitored all day long. And then what we'll do is, and they can put in their request what the deadline is. So for example, say it's a lock. The lock is getting ready to expire. They can email our inbox. Once we get that email, we will remove the loan out of audit hold. We will allow them to extend the lock, and then we put it back in audit hold. If it's a super emergency, they can also escalate it to the account executive, who can call us as well.
Right. Right.
And that's another thing, since you bring that up, Rich, time is of the essence in some of these situations. So, sometimes things are out of our control. So I just, kind of want to share that. Sometimes we're looking at third parties, or sometimes we're waiting on our business partner to respond in situations. So,
yeah, they're not all black and white, right? And I think it's very difficult to understand that when you're in the middle of a situation. But a lot of times it could be a third party where there's something really serious behind the scenes that maybe we're not at a point in which we can share. But if there's one thing I could let our business partners know, it's that we're in the business to close loans and protect our customer, right? And so if there is something, trust that we're looking into it to make sure that nobody's at risk. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So last but not least, what are some of you mentioned a couple of resources. What are some of the resources that are available to help our customers with either due diligence or identify current trending that may be going on? Because we just mentioned one trend that might, that was going on now with equity lines and identity theft. That could change next month, next year, as it usually typically does, right? Where can they go, and what are some of the things that can be accessed or that you recommend that they utilize on a regular basis to keep their business safe and sound?
Absolutely. So for due diligence, there's a lot of free tools out there that they can use. Google is number one. You can find out anything through Google. Yeah. So I would start with that. But there's also things such as LinkedIn to try to verify someone's employment. You have Facebook. Facebook will help out with potential occupancy issues, employment issues, possible undisclosed relationships. So, if you're questioning the borrower's employment and they've been on the job less than a year, received a significant amount of income, you're really questioning that, and you have a a verification of employment from their employer, you go onto Facebook and find out that's their neighbor. Right. You could find undisclosed relationships. So those can be helpful, as well as for occupancy, Airbnb, Zillow, has the homes been rented? So you have all of those that are free. You also have LexisNexis. You have to pay for that, but that's a very good tool that you can do. Also, sometimes picking up the phone and doing interviews with individuals is very helpful as well.
Yeah.
And then as far as, what was the last part of the question?
Due
diligence, and then resources for trends. Yep. Resources for trends, you can go out to Fannie Mae's website. They always have their current trends out there. You can also Google mortgage fraud trends. You can find information out there as well. Trying to think. Freddie Mac often will have some of their trends out there.
What about training courses? Is there anything out there where, our customers could go on a regular basis or once or twice a year and maybe get some training?
Yep. So Fannie Mae offers several trainings. They offer a whole series of trainings, and based on like basic mortgage fraud down to schemes, those are free. Each class is, I think you just register by an email, and they're probably no more than 30 minutes long. So they have that, but they also have on their website a list of every single loan document and red flags per every document. So that's very, very helpful.
Sure.
MGIC also offers free classes every single month, and it's not just fraud based. It could be on self-employed borrowers or whatever you may need. Freddie Mac has what they call a fraudcast, or a series of podcasts, and they do different ones. It could be lies within, and it could be talking about income misrep or so and so, so on. So there's a lot of free resources out there, but those are the big ones that I can think of.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you for sharing those.
Of course.
So we got a couple questions that came in through the chat. So let me just throw a few of these at you before we wrap it up. So the first one, what does it mean? And I think you already addressed this, right? If a loan is placed in audit hold status.
Yep. So audit hold at Flagstar means that loan is being reviewed by the Mortgage Fraud Investigation Unit. Our team is the only team that uses that status. So if you ever look into the system and you see that your loan is an audit hold, doesn't mean that it's being denied.
Right.
Just means that our team it was referred to our team for one reason or another. We're going to conduct a pre-funding review, and if there's no issues, we will allow that transaction to proceed by taking that loan out of audit hold, and it would go back to the original status that it was in prior to the audit hold.
Got it. So this is a question that, it's somewhat of a loaded question, but it's a valid question, right? And that's, how long does a typical loan investigation take? And the key word being typical, because some of them are quite simply reviewed and set right back, and some of them may take a little bit longer. But how would you answer that question?
We actually get asked that question a lot. It's a tough question. You would think it would be an easy question to answer, but it all depends on the number of concerns identified to be reviewed, the severity of those concerns, as well as if we're waiting on third parties. So on unclosed loans, they're always going to be our number one priority. We obviously want to get through those quicker than closed loans, because if there is no issues, we don't want to penalize the borrower. We don't want to blow locks and so on. But we will try to jump on those immediately, review them, look at the referral reason, try to do as much research as possible. If it's strictly an asset concern, we'll immediately get that verification sent out. Sometimes the bank can respond immediately. Sometimes it could take them 3 days. So we never know what we're going to get.
Right.
But we do try to make those our priority.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, we'll take one more. What steps do I take if I receive a letter from MFIU regarding a finding?
So if you're a business partner and you receive a letter from our team, the first thing we want you to do is obviously read the findings, go back and refresh your mind on that file. And then we look at you as you are the business partner with this customer. You know the customer, you've met with them. So reach out to them and kind of talk through the situation. Try to get as much supporting documentation and explanations as possible. So an example would be, say the loan was pulled for a pre-funding audit and it was confirmed that the borrower left their job. Okay, the loan hasn't closed yet. Reach out to the borrower. Did you leave your job? Or, because it could be through the work number and it could just say inactive. Did you leave your job? Yes or no. If so, do you have a new job? Where are you working now? What is your new income? Or did you have to go out unexpectedly on a medical leave? And try to get to the bottom of what the situation is, and then work with our team to try to get that resolved. Does this make sense? Can we still proceed with the loan, and so on?
Right. Got it. Great questions and great answers. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. I hope you found this to be extremely valuable as you manage your business going forward. Some great stuff in here, some great information that even if we took a couple nuggets from here today, like I said, I think we're managing our business in a much better fashion and protecting ourselves. And we're here to do that for you as well as a partner. Nanette, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us as well. We greatly appreciate you doing so.